The first time Emma saw Daniel, it was raining. The kind of rain that blurred the edges of the world, turning the ordinary gray streets into something magical. She had been in a rush, clutching her umbrella as the wind tried to wrench it from her hands. She didn't see him until it was too late, until she collided into him at the corner of Fifth and Maple. His coffee flew out of his hand, splattering across the pavement, and her umbrella tumbled into a nearby puddle. "Oh, my God, I'm so sorry," Emma stammered, cheeks flushing as she bent to retrieve her ruined umbrella. "It's all right," Daniel said, his voice calm and steady, despite the coffee now soaking the hem of his coat. He smiled, a quiet, understanding smile that made Emma pause. "I guess the universe wanted me to cut back on caffeine today." She laughed nervously, brushing her damp hair out of her face. "Still, I feel terrible. Can I make it up to you? Buy you another coffee?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, I think I'd like that." And so, what began as a chance encounter over spilled coffee turned into a conversation that stretched for hours. They didn't notice the rain stopping or the café slowly emptying around them. By the time they parted ways, exchanging numbers with a mix of shyness and excitement, Emma felt like she had stumbled onto something rare. But love, she would learn, isn't built in a single moment. It's a process, a patient, deliberate unfolding. Emma and Daniel's first few weeks of getting to know each other were a whirlwind of text messages, late-night phone calls, and tentative dates. They discovered they had a lot in common, both loved old books, rainy afternoons, and the quiet hum of jazz music. But they were also different in ways that intrigued them. Emma was spontaneous and full of energy, someone who jumped into life head-first. Daniel, on the other hand, was thoughtful and deliberate, the kind of person who planned everything down to the smallest detail. Their differences didn't bother Emma at first. If anything, she found them endearing. Daniel's steady presence grounded her, while her impulsiveness brought a spark to his otherwise predictable days. But as the initial excitement began to fade, the challenges of building something real started to emerge. Emma was the first to notice it. One evening, as they sat in a quiet corner of her favorite diner, she brought it up. "Do you ever feel like we're holding back?" she asked, stirring her milkshake absent-mindedly. Daniel looked up from his plate, his brow furrowing. "Holding back how?" "I don't know, like we're not fully letting each other in. I mean, I like you, really like you, but sometimes it feels like there's this wall between us." Daniel was silent for a moment, his eyes searching hers. Finally, he sighed. "I think I know what you mean. It's not that I don't care about you, Emma, I do. It's just, trust takes time for me." She nodded, though a flicker of doubt lingered in her scent. She didn't want to pressure him, but she couldn't help wondering if he'd ever fully let her in. What Emma didn't know then, what Daniel hadn't yet found the courage to tell her, was that he carried the weight of a painful past. His last relationship had ended badly, an abrupt betrayal that had left him questioning everything he thought he knew about love and true scent. It wasn't that he didn't want to let Emma in, he was just scared. Scared of being vulnerable, of opening himself up only to be hurt again. But Emma wasn't the kind of person to give up easily. She didn't push or demand answers. Instead, she chose to be patient. She showed him, in 100 small ways, that she was someone he could rely on. She remembered the little things that mattered to him, like how he always took his coffee black or how he loved the smell of fresh pine. She listened when he talked about his dreams and fears, even if he only shared them in fragments. And slowly, bit by bit, Daniel began to let his guard down. One evening, as they sat on the couch in Daniel's apartment, he turned to her with a seriousness she hadn't seen before. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "about why I've been cautious. Emma set down her mug of tea, her full attention on him. "I'm listening." He hesitated, then began to tell her about his paw scent, about how he'd loved someone deeply, only to have that trust shattered in the end. He told her about the doubts and insecurities that had followed, the fear that he'd never be enough for someone. By the time he finished, his shoulders slumped as if a weight he'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Emma reached for his hand, her grip gentle but firm. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you. But I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for the long haul, Daniel. We'll take this one step at a time, together." From that night on, their relationship began to change. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of doubt, still times when they stumbled. But they faced those challenges together, learning and growing as they went. Daniel started to open up more, sharing pieces of himself that he'd kept hidden for so long. He told Emma about his childhood, his dreams of becoming a writer, and the quiet fears that sometimes kept him awake at night. Emma, in turn, shared her own vulnerabilities, the insecurities she hid behind her confident exterior, the fear of being too much or not enough. Trust, they realized, wasn't something that happened overnight. It was something they had to choose every day, through their words and actions. It was in the way Daniel made Emma feel safe enough to cry in front of him, and the way Emma encouraged Daniel to chase his dreams, even when he doubted himself. It was in the quiet moments they shared, like reading together on lazy Sunday mornings or dancing in the kitchen to their favorite jazz records. They learned to navigate their differences, too. When Emma's impulsiveness clashed with Daniel's need for structure, they found ways to compromise. Emma started to appreciate the comfort of a well-thought-out plan, while Daniel learned to embrace the beauty of spontaneity. They didn't always get it right, but they never stopped trying. Two years later, on a crisp autumn evening, Daniel stood in the middle of the park where they'd had their first real date. The leaves crunched under his feet, and the air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Emma stood beside him, her cheeks pink from the cold, her eyes sparkling as she looked up at him. "Why are you being so mysterious?" she asked, laughing as he led her down the winding path. "You'll see," Daniel said, his heart pounding in his cheese scent. He had planned this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, he felt a wave of nervous excitement. When they reached the clearing, Emma gasped. Strings of fairy lights hung from the trees, casting a warm glow over the space. A small table was set up in the center, with candles and flowers and 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. "Daniel, this is beautiful," she said, her voice full of wonder. He smiled, taking her hands in his. "Emma, you've taught me so much about love, about what it means to trust and to build something real. You've been my anchor, my light, my everything. And I can't imagine my life without you." He knelt down on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Emma's hands flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "Emma, will you marry me?" For a moment she was too overcome to speak. But then she nodded, a radiant smile breaking across her face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, 1,000 times yes. As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from certainty, because life was anything but certain. It was the peace that came from knowing they had built something strong, something lasting, a love that could weather any storm. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms under the glow of the fairy lights, they knew that their journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, but they would face them together, one step at a time. Because trust, they had learned, wasn't just the foundation of love, it was the bridge that carried them forward, into a future they would build hand in hand.